Imagine standing at the edge of a promise, your heart full of hope, yet the answer seems just out of reach. You've prayed, you've believed, but still the breakthrough you long for hasn't come. Maybe the waiting feels endless and doubt begins to whisper, tempting you to give up. But what if this season of waiting is not a setback, but a sacred part of God's divine plan? What if the delay is actually God's way of preparing you for something greater than you can imagine? Today, we will journey together through the beautiful truth that God's plan is always worth the wait. We'll uncover how trusting His timing, even when it's hard, opens the door to breakthroughs that transform not only our circumstances, but our very souls. So stay with me, because the hope and strength you need to embrace your waiting season is right here. And God's perfect timing is about to change everything. When we say God's timing is perfect, not predictable, we are confronting the deep divide between human understanding and divine wisdom. As people of faith, we often come to God with expectations shaped by our own timelines, our own sense of urgency, and our limited perspective. We believe we know when something should happen, when the door should open, when the healing should come, when the promise should be fulfilled. And yet, time and again, God does not operate according to our clock. He is not rushed by our impatience, nor is He swayed by our fears. His timing is not merely good, it is flawless. But to us, that perfection can often feel like delay. God's perfect timing is rooted in His eternal nature. He is not bound by seconds, minutes, or years. What feels like a lifetime to us is a breath to Him. He sees the end from the beginning. While we are staring at the chapter we are stuck in, He holds the entire book. This is why our expectations often collide with frustration. We want immediate answers, but God is shaping something eternal. His timing is not about making life convenient, it is about making us complete. Throughout Scripture, we see that God's timing often confounded the expectations of His people. Joseph had a dream in his youth of greatness and leadership, yet he spent years in slavery and prison before that dream became reality. David was anointed king as a young shepherd boy, but he would wait over a decade through rejection, betrayal, and danger before sitting on the throne. Jesus, the Son of God, waited 30 years before beginning His public ministry, and even then He often said, "My time has not yet come." The consistent pattern across the biblical narrative is that God rarely moves on our schedule, but when He moves, everything changes. The perfection of God's timing is often visible only in hindsight. When the promise is fulfilled, we begin to understand why the wait was necessary. Perhaps the path we desired would have led to pride, or the blessing would have crushed us instead of lifted us. Maybe we weren't ready. Our character still in development, our faith still immature. Or perhaps someone else was still being positioned, or the world needed to shift just slightly before the door could open. God's timing is not just about us. It is interconnected with His larger plan for others, for communities, and even for generations to come. What makes His timing difficult to accept is that it is rarely predictable. We cannot forecast it, manufacture it, or manipulate it. We cannot fast forward the process through more prayer, or pressure God into action through worry or anxiety. God is not a machine that delivers when we press the right buttons. He is a Father, and a perfect one at that. One who knows what we need and when we need it. He delays not to harm us, but to heal us. He withholds not to punish, but to prepare. And so we must learn to surrender our timelines. We must lay down our clocks and pick up our crosses. We must trust that when God is silent, He is not still. When He delays, He is not disinterested. His love is too great to give us something too soon, and His wisdom too deep to explain it all now. The heart of faith beats with the quiet confidence that God knows what He is doing, even when we do not. His timing may surprise us, frustrate us, or test us, but in the end it will always reveal itself as perfect. Waiting is often seen through human eyes as empty or unproductive, but in the realm of faith, waiting holds a deeper, richer meaning. It is not a void or a pause in God's work. Rather, it is a sacred season where trust is tested and refined. The Bible is filled with stories of individuals who waited, sometimes for years, yet their waiting was not wasted time, but a vital part of God's unfolding plan. When we understand that waiting is not wasting, our perspective shifts from frustration to faith, from doubt to expectation. When God asks us to wait, He invites us into a process that builds our spiritual maturity. Waiting challenges our impatience and forces us to depend not on our own strength or timing, but on His faithfulness. It teaches us to relinquish control and surrender our desires to His will. This surrender is not passive resignation, but an active trust, a daily choice to believe that God is working behind the scenes, even when we see no evidence. This kind of trust strengthens our relationship with God and deepens our intimacy with Him. It is in the waiting that our faith is shaped, tested, and purified. Consider the nature of God's promises. Many times His promises come with a delay, not because He forgets or ignores us, but because He is orchestrating the perfect moment for fulfillment. The delay is a divine appointment where God's timing and purpose align. It is during these moments that God is often working in ways unseen. He might be shaping our character, preparing our hearts, or clearing obstacles. In this way, waiting becomes a holy preparation. It is a time when God's grace sustains us and His strength empowers us to persevere. Waiting also teaches us patience, a fruit of the Spirit that does not come naturally to us. In a culture that values instant gratification, the discipline of waiting can seem counterintuitive. But patience is not just a virtue, it is a spiritual muscle that strengthens our ability to endure trials and maintain hope. It is in waiting that we learn to lean not on our own understanding, but to trust God's greater plan. Each moment of patience practiced is a step closer to the breakthrough we long for. The psalmist declares, "Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord." This command is not a suggestion, but an invitation to active waiting. It calls us to be strong, courageous, and hopeful in the midst of delay. Waiting is not a time to be idle, but to be spiritually alert, praying, worshiping, and preparing for the breakthrough that is coming. This kind of waiting is full of expectation, filled with the confidence that God's promises will come to pass. Sometimes, waiting means standing in the tension between what we see and what we believe. We may face disappointment, discouragement, or doubt, but faith calls us to hold on to God's word, even when circumstances seem contrary. Waiting is a spiritual discipline that keeps us anchored in hope. It reminds us that God's timing is perfect and that He is always working for our good. When we embrace waiting as a purposeful season, we stop wasting energy on frustration and start investing it in faith. Waiting is also a testimony to those around us. When we wait with grace and trust, we bear witness to God's faithfulness in a skeptical world. Our patience and peace in the waiting season speak louder than words and draw others to the God who sustains us. It reveals a confidence that goes beyond circumstances, showing that our hope is anchored not in the timing of events, but in the character of God. In this waiting, we are invited to a deeper reliance on God's presence, rather than just His promises. Sometimes we focus so much on the outcome that we miss the blessing of God's companionship through the process. Waiting allows us to experience God's nearness in a profound way. It is an opportunity to cultivate a quiet heart, to listen more intently, and to grow in trust. This intimacy with God during the waiting season transforms our perspective and prepares us for the breakthrough ahead. When we face delays in receiving what we long for, it is easy to feel discouraged, as if God has forgotten us or turned away. Yet one of the most profound truths we must grasp as believers is that delayed does not mean denied. The postponement of a breakthrough, a blessing, or an answer to prayer is not a sign of God's rejection, but often a sign of His perfect provision and timing. It is a reminder that God's plans far exceed our own understanding, and that His purposes are always working behind the scenes, even when we cannot see them. The Scriptures are filled with examples of God's people who experienced significant delays before their promises were fulfilled. Abraham and Sarah waited decades before the birth of Isaac, the child of promise. Joseph endured years of imprisonment before he was elevated to power in Egypt. David was anointed king early in his life, but had to wait many years while Saul remained on the throne. In each story, the delay was not denial, but preparation. A time when God was shaping their hearts, strengthening their faith, and arranging circumstances for the fullness of His plan to come to pass. When God delays, He is often working in ways we cannot perceive. Sometimes the timing is designed to protect us from what we are not yet ready to handle. If God answered every prayer immediately, without the refining process of waiting, we might not have the wisdom, character, or strength to steward what He gives us. Delays allow God to develop our perseverance and patience, building resilience and trust that can only come through enduring hardship and uncertainty. Moreover, a delay can be a divine redirect. We may be so focused on a particular outcome that we fail to see a better plan unfolding. God's delay may prevent us from rushing into something that is not good for us, or guide us toward a path that is more aligned with His will. The waiting period becomes a season of discernment, where God's wisdom is revealed slowly and surely, redirecting our desires and dreams to align with His greater purpose. It's also important to understand that delay can involve God's timing in the lives of others, not just our own. Sometimes our breakthrough depends on the readiness or positioning of another person, or on events happening in the world around us. God's plan often involves more than just one individual. It is part of a larger tapestry of His kingdom work. This means that while we wait, God is coordinating multiple pieces, weaving together circumstances for the right moment when the breakthrough will come. In the moments of delay, our faith is tested. We are invited to trust God even when the evidence seems to say otherwise. Trust is the bridge between what we cannot see and what we believe. It is the choice to hold on to God's promises despite the silence or the seeming postponement. This trust is not blind, but rooted in the character of God, who is faithful, loving, and sovereign. It is in these moments that our faith becomes real, not just a hopeful wish, but a confident assurance that God is at work. Delays are also opportunities to deepen our relationship with God. When answers do not come immediately, we are compelled to draw closer to Him, to seek His presence more fervently, and to learn dependence rather than independence. Waiting becomes a spiritual discipline that cultivates intimacy and reliance on God's unfailing love. It is during these seasons that God often reveals Himself in new ways, comforting, teaching, and strengthening His children. We must guard against the temptation to give up or turn away when faced with delay. Many lose heart simply because they equate delay with denial. Yet the Bible encourages us to persevere and remain steadfast, for the Lord is not slow in keeping His promises, as some understand slowness, but is patient, wanting none to perish but all to come to repentance. The waiting is part of God's mercy and grace, allowing time for growth, repentance, and preparation. The truth that delayed does not mean denied is a beacon of hope for anyone feeling stuck, frustrated, or weary in their spiritual journey. It is a reminder that God's hand has not withdrawn and His power has not diminished. His plan is unfolding and His promises will be fulfilled at the perfect moment. Holding on to this truth strengthens our resolve, fuels our faith, and encourages us to keep walking forward with hope and confidence, knowing that the breakthrough we desire is coming, not if, but when God says so. Faith grows most profoundly in the waiting room, that place between what God has promised and what our eyes yet see. It is easy to have faith when everything is going well, when answers come quickly, or when blessings flow without interruption. But real, lasting faith is forged in the difficult seasons, the long waits, the unanswered prayers, the moments when hope feels fragile and the future uncertain. These times stretch us beyond our comfort zones and invite us to trust God not only with the outcome, but with the process itself. In the waiting room, faith becomes less about sight and more about trust. It is a faith that does not demand proof, but believes in the character of God, even when circumstances suggest otherwise. This is the faith that moves mountains. not by its own strength, but because it rests in the unchanging promises of God. It is a faith that declares with unwavering confidence, "Though I cannot see it now, I know God is working." The Bible illustrates this truth repeatedly. Consider the disciples who walked with Jesus, yet did not fully understand the plan until after his resurrection. They waited in confusion and fear, but it was in this waiting that their faith deepened. After the resurrection, their faith was no longer based on hope alone, but on the reality of what God had done. Similarly, many saints of old endured waiting seasons that tested and matured their faith. Abraham, Moses, David, Hannah, all who waited long and learned to trust God's timing. The waiting room is not a place of inactivity, but a place of spiritual growth. During these times, God is cultivating perseverance, patience, and endurance within us. The Apostle Paul writes about endurance as a necessary virtue in the Christian life, and it is often developed through seasons of delay and testing. Our faith grows because waiting forces us to seek God more earnestly, to dig deeper into His Word, and to cling more tightly to His promises. It is in the struggle of waiting that we develop a deeper reliance on God's strength rather than our own. Moreover, faith in the waiting room grows through prayer and worship. When the answers seem delayed, we are invited to draw near to God, to pour out our hearts, and to praise Him even in uncertainty. Worship is a powerful expression of faith because it shifts our focus from the problem to the provider. It reminds us of God's sovereignty and goodness, strengthening our belief that He is able and willing to act on our behalf. Through prayer and worship, the waiting season becomes a fertile ground for faith to flourish. The waiting room also teaches us humility. It reveals how much we need God's guidance and grace. Waiting strips away our illusions of control and forces us to admit our limitations. In this surrender, faith grows as we learn to depend fully on God, recognizing that His wisdom surpasses our own understanding. This humility is a foundation for faith that is resilient and steadfast. In times of waiting, doubt and discouragement may try to creep in, but faith is the antidote. It calls us to focus not on our fears or frustrations, but on the promises God has given. It invites us to recall His faithfulness in the past and to trust that He will be faithful in the future. Faith is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of trust despite difficulty. It is a light that shines brightest in the darkest moments. Faith in the waiting room is also a powerful testimony to others. When we stand firm in belief despite delay, we demonstrate the reality of God's sustaining power. Our patience and trust encourage those around us, showing that faith is not just about receiving blessings, but about trusting the one who blesses. Our steadfastness in waiting points others to a God who is worthy of trust, no matter the season. Finally, faith grows in the waiting room because it is the space where God prepares us for the breakthrough ahead. It is a place of transformation where our hearts are aligned more closely with His purposes. The waiting is part of the journey to the promise, shaping us into vessels ready to carry the blessings God has planned. Faith flourishes here because it understands that God is working all things for good, even when the timing is unclear. This growth in faith is not always comfortable, but it is essential. Without the waiting room, our faith would remain shallow, vulnerable to every challenge. Through waiting, faith becomes deep-rooted and unshakable, a faith that trusts God's character, embraces His timing, and confidently anticipates the breakthrough that is sure to come. God's blessings and our readiness to receive them are deeply intertwined. Often we desire a breakthrough so fervently that we forget the preparation required within us to handle it. It is not uncommon to find ourselves longing for God's promises to manifest without realizing that God is simultaneously working on us, molding our character, refining our faith, and equipping us spiritually for the responsibility that comes with the blessing. This divine preparation is essential because God's blessings are not just about the moment of fulfillment, but about the person we become in the process. When God delays the breakthrough, it is not to frustrate us, but to shape us. The delay is a sacred time of growth and transformation. Like a potter shaping clay on a wheel, God gently removes the rough edges and strengthens the vessel. This process can be uncomfortable, even painful, but it is necessary. If God were to give us the blessing before we were ready, it might overwhelm us, lead us astray, or cause us to misuse the gift. God's timing includes perfect preparation so that the blessing does not become a burden but a tool for His glory. Throughout the Bible, we see many examples where God prepared His people before granting them their breakthrough. Joseph's journey from prison to palace was not just a change of circumstance, but a transformation of heart and spirit. His time in prison was a season of humility, patience, and trust that prepared him to govern a nation wisely. David's years as a shepherd and fugitive prepared him to be a king who ruled with justice and compassion. Even Jesus, before beginning his public ministry, spent 30 years growing in wisdom and stature, fully prepared to fulfill his divine mission. These examples remind us that God's plan is holistic. He prepares both the blessing and the believer. Preparation involves more than just waiting, it involves active growth. God often uses trials, challenges, and seasons of waiting to build qualities like patience, endurance, humility, and faithfulness. These qualities are essential for the steward of any breakthrough. They keep us grounded and focused on God rather than on our own desires. They teach us to rely on God's strength rather than our own. They shape us into leaders, servants, and witnesses who can handle God's blessings with grace and wisdom. Recognizing that God is preparing us during the waiting period also helps us to remain hopeful and patient. Instead of becoming frustrated or discouraged by delay, we can view it as an opportunity for spiritual formation. This mindset transforms waiting from a passive endurance into an active participation in God's work within us. It invites us to partner with God by seeking Him daily, studying His Word, praying fervently, and cultivating the fruit of the Spirit. Through this partnership, we grow in readiness to receive the breakthrough God has promised. Furthermore, this preparation aligns us with God's purposes beyond our own. Sometimes God's timing for our breakthrough is connected to a larger plan that involves other people, communities, or even generations. By preparing us fully, God ensures that when the blessing comes, it will be used not just for personal gain, but for kingdom advancement. The blessing becomes a testimony, a source of encouragement, and a tool for ministry. We are not only recipients of God's favor, but also stewards charged with multiplying His goodness in the world. This truth also guards us against impatience and doubt. When we understand that God is preparing us, we can trust that the delay is purposeful and beneficial. We can rest in the assurance that God's timing is not arbitrary but intentional. This faith protects our hearts from despair and helps us remain steadfast, knowing that the breakthrough will come at the appointed time, perfectly timed with our readiness. In recognizing God's preparation, we are invited to cooperate with His work in our lives. This cooperation means embracing the lessons of the waiting period, seeking growth in every challenge, and aligning our hearts with God's will. It means trusting that God's plan is greater than our impatience, and that His preparation is the key to a lasting and meaningful breakthrough. Ultimately, the preparation God does in us is as significant as the blessing He gives. The breakthrough is not only a reward, but also the fruit of a process, a divine shaping of our character, faith, and purpose. When we are prepared by God, we are equipped to carry the blessing, fulfill our calling, and bring glory to His name. This divine preparation is a testament to God's wisdom and love, showing that He cares not just about the outcome, but about who we become along the journey. There is a profound certainty in knowing that every promise of God has an appointed time. This truth speaks to the heart of faith and patience, reminding us that God's plans are not random or haphazard, but perfectly scheduled according to His divine wisdom. The concept of an appointed time assures us that God's promises will come to pass, not if, but when the time He has ordained arrives. This timing is deliberate, precise, and aligned with His greater purpose for our lives and the world around us. God's appointed time is rooted in His sovereignty. He is not bound by human calendars or pressures, but moves according to His perfect will. When we feel delayed or forgotten, we must remember that God's timing is far beyond our comprehension. What may seem like a long wait to us is simply the unfolding of a perfect plan that only God can orchestrate. This realization helps us to surrender our anxieties about timing and embrace trust in God's control over all things. The scriptures affirm this truth repeatedly. We read in Habakkuk 2:3 that the vision awaits its appointed time, it will not fail. Though it lingers, it will come at the proper moment. This passage encourages us to wait patiently because God's promises are sure. The appointed time is a divine appointment that cannot be missed or altered. It is a fixed point in eternity when God's purpose will be revealed and His word fulfilled. Understanding that there is an appointed time also helps us to navigate the tension between expectation and patience. As believers, we are called to live with hope, eagerly anticipating God's promises, while simultaneously practicing steadfast patience. This tension is not easy, but it is essential for spiritual growth. It teaches us to live in faith, holding on to God's promises without forcing the timing. This balance cultivates a deep trust in God's faithfulness and sovereignty. God's appointed time is also a time of preparation. Before the fulfillment of a promise, God is often at work behind the scenes, aligning circumstances, preparing hearts, and orchestrating events. This hidden work is vital because it ensures that when the breakthrough comes, it will be complete and effective. The delay is not a denial, but a necessary preparation for the fullness of the blessing. It reminds us that God's plans are holistic, concerned not just with the what, but the when and how. This truth encourages us to persevere through seasons of waiting and uncertainty. Knowing that the promise will come at the appointed time strengthens our resolve and sustains our hope. It prevents discouragement and helps us to remain focused on God rather than on the delays. When we live with an awareness of God's appointed time, we find peace in the midst of waiting because we trust that God's timing is perfect and purposeful. The concept of an appointed time also calls us to be attentive and ready. We are not called to passively wait, but to actively prepare. The appointed time demands that we remain faithful, obedient, and watchful, cultivating spiritual readiness. This readiness means living in alignment with God's will, growing in faith, and maintaining a heart open to His leading. Being ready ensures that when the appointed time arrives, we can receive the breakthrough with gratitude and wisdom. Moreover, the appointed time often aligns with God's broader redemptive plan. It is connected not only to our personal lives, but to His kingdom purposes on earth. Sometimes the timing of our breakthrough intersects with the lives of others, communities, or even nations. God's appointed time is part of a grand design that brings glory to Him and advances His mission in the world. This understanding invites us to trust not only for ourselves, but for the impact God desires to make through our breakthroughs. In recognizing God's appointed time, we are invited into a posture of humble waiting, trusting that God's ways are higher and His timing perfect. This trust is an expression of faith that honors God's sovereignty and acknowledges His intimate involvement in every detail of our lives. It is a faith that rests in the assurance that God is never late, never early, but always exactly on time. This truth transforms how we view delays and waiting periods. Instead of frustration or anxiety, we can experience hope and peace. Instead of rushing or forcing outcomes, we can wait with confidence. Knowing there is an appointed time encourages us to keep believing, keep praying, and keep trusting, because God's promises are sure and His timing is perfect. As we come to the close of this message, let us hold firmly to the truth that God's plan is always worth the wait. Life's seasons of delay, uncertainty, and waiting are not empty moments. They are divine appointments where God is at work, preparing us, strengthening our faith, shaping our character, and orchestrating circumstances beyond our understanding. Though we may struggle to see His hand in the moment, we can rest in the certainty that His timing is perfect, purposeful, and filled with grace. We have explored how God's timing is not predictable by human standards, yet it is flawlessly perfect. The waiting periods in our lives are not punishment or neglect, but sacred seasons designed to grow our patience, faith, and endurance. These times teach us to trust God more deeply, to rely not on what we see, but on the promises of an unchanging God who is always faithful. We also learn that waiting is never wasted. It is a time of preparation. God is shaping us so that when the breakthrough comes, we are ready to steward it with wisdom and humility. His delays often protect us, redirect us, and prepare us for the greater good that lies ahead. This preparation aligns us with His larger kingdom purposes, reminding us that our breakthroughs are part of a grander divine design. In the waiting room of life, our faith grows stronger as we learn to trust God's character, even when answers seem delayed. We discover that faith is not simply hoping for something to happen, but trusting in the one who has promised. This faith carries us through uncertainty, strengthens us in trials, and becomes a powerful testimony to those around us. Finally, we are reminded that every promise of God has an appointed time, a perfect moment ordained by God Himself. This truth invites us to embrace patience, to live with hopeful expectation, and to remain spiritually ready for the fulfillment of His promises. Knowing that God is never early or late, but always exactly on time, fills our hearts with peace and confidence. As you walk forward from this moment, remember that God's plan for your life is good and His timing is flawless. Your breakthrough is coming. It is coming at the perfect time, in the perfect way, and for the perfect purpose. So hold fast to your faith, nurture your relationship with God, and continue trusting Him with your whole heart. Thank you for allowing me to share this message with you today. It has been a privilege to speak into your lives and encourage you to trust God's timing. May you be strengthened in your faith and encouraged in your wait, knowing that the God who promises is faithful to deliver. Let us keep encouraging one another, standing firm in hope, and celebrating the breakthroughs that God will bring according to His perfect plan. Thank you, and may God bless you abundantly as you continue to trust Him and wait faithfully for His wonderful plans to unfold in your life.